It looks
maybe
like it looks like they had some type of triggering explosive that detonated the car.
these are probably the signs of a lone wolf actor who's inexperienced in
Yeah.
making these type of these devices, right? Is that something that we could probably all come to a consensus on?
Yeah, I mean, this is pure speculation. They could have panicked going over the bridge, thought that somebody was following them or something, accelerated, rammed into. It looks like one of the stations, one of the checkpoint stations. It's hard to tell even from this video, but it certainly does not look like a vehicle crash explosion, but a detonation and then subsequent ignition of fuel.
Are we watching the video where it's coming from the right-hand side?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's really looking like a crash and the fuel tank blowing, because there's no blast effect. There's no secondary effect. There's no blast effect other than pieces flying forward.
Yeah.
I would like to see the border officer's view, because there's 3 cameras in there, including the one that's right at the license plate level. So that will make it even more interesting. But hey, intentional. This isn't a drunk, well, we can always hold 10% here. That it was a crazy drunk who just didn't see the whole border checkpoint and blasted into it. We'll see.
I don't see any kind of high order debt in that camera footage. Yeah, I don't see an explosive there.
Yeah, it's a catastrophic event. It's just not an explosive event. Like you said, no high order explosives. Even low grade stuff like propane. My first thought was, is it an RV? Propane tanks can blow big, but they would have blown the entire ceiling out of that place. A lot of shrapnel. But, even if they had rigged the car with propane, we had a couple of incidents in Iraq that were propane bombs, just giant mass of propane, huge explosion, huge fireball. So again, I'd like to see what happened inside, and they're going to tell us.
Because even with a propane type bomb, it would be a pressure type bomb where you need a pressure vessel to cause it to explode,
right?
And all that shrapnel would destroy all the glass above it.
Yeah.
There's no damage to the glass above it, so it doesn't seem like there's anything that exploded.
Even a pipe bomb would have caused.
Yeah, so they're saying that MSNBC is confirming with 4 senior law enforcement officials. They said the vehicle crashed into the checkpoint structure and then exploded.
Yeah,
is what they're describing.
So yeah, I mean, vehicle is a weapon system.
I mean, Malcolm, but this is also, I mean, like we saw, like you said, with the fire, right? The same thing that happened at the hospital when the rocket came in and impacted, and there's 5 or 6 cars there that caught fire. There was that massive fireball that was all over the news that night when everybody was saying it was a bomb that got dropped, and then the next day when you saw it was actually 5 vehicles on fire. So I mean, what you're saying makes sense.
Right. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, there's a red car in one of the first photographs. It has no blast effect. It looks like it had a side swipe, sort of crumpled in passenger.
The actual incident report now. It's been filed, and so it says that the vehicle was referred to from primary into secondary for additional inspection. So they may have panicked.
Yeah, primary to secondary on the Canadian side, because when you're there, right there at that customs post, the primary, the secondary would have been on the right hand side, and there's no place to get ahead of steam. Even if I floor it, you're only going to be going about 30 miles per hour before you hit a barrier.
Yeah, it was being sent to the X-ray for X-ray.
Okay.
And then it exploded.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it says once the vehicle arrived at the secondary inspection area, it exploded. That's from the Port Authority.
Well,
but that's also a first reporting from people who saw stuff, right? I wouldn't assume that means that there was an explosive in in the
Right.
car. That's just a cop who wrote a report. We need to get FBI to do their site exploitation to figure that out.
Yeah. And there's a million cameras at those checkpoints, a million, including the officer's camera. That's interesting that nobody, no CVP officers are reported injured, or maybe they just haven't reported them.
There was one with minor injuries transported to the hospital.
There you go. Because those booths are bomb proof. If the doors closed, if the doors open, they can be injured from blast effect and things
Are
like
the
that.
two
Or
reported killed? Are they the ones that were in the car?
that's what they say.
Is it abnormal to have two people inside of a car that's doing a suicide attack?
I
No,
don't think so.
I've seen them in Iraq. We had families full of them. We had a 5-person family down in Nasiriyah. Sometimes they just ISIS, they love to go holding hands. So I wouldn't say that. And it gives you, he's your jihad buddy. So, you both, like somebody said earlier, I heard that joke about 72 virgins, right? 144 virgins here. You want to bring some help along.
Are you sure about the bomb-proof nature of that building? That looks like what I installed last week. It's literally just a security shack with 4-inch tubular steel and windows. I don't think it was bomb resistant.
I think it's got to be at least bulletproof resistant. The one I cross at Lacal every week, which is between Plattsburgh and Montreal. And those things, if they pull the door shut, they're going to be maybe blast resistant. It's definitely ballistic glass, and if it's ballistic glass, it's going to be ballistic material around it. I don't know about that specific post, but those sites are pretty hard. Even with that little air conditioning thing on the top tells you that it's got some measure of protection. Because why even have it? This isn't the 50s.
It's way too early to speculate on who's behind
Yeah.
this. But I did want to share that I've seen. It's too early to say.
Charles, your mic's hot.
Yeah. Well, let me make this comment. 2 weeks ago, on the same day that the director of the FBI was starting his interview or his testimony on my old told you so moment, because I think that based on the amount of emotion we're seeing, that they would step up from amateur to improvised, sell smoking hash and doing some low grade thing. We also had the Jordanian who was arrested in Houston buying weapons. He was going to kill everyone in a mosque. Right? Yeah, he's going to kill everyone in a synagogue. And then, but at some point we were going to get to an emotional incident where someone thought about it. This may not be it, but it's an example of someone using the weapon. Right? So these things can be, that was a truck, but vehicles themselves can be used as as the weapon system. And we should respect that because they would know, hit that thing hard, hit the booth. Before those booths, it's not the booth. There is a 4-foot-high concrete pillar. That pillar protects the next thing, which is the radiation detector, which protects the next thing, which is your license plate camera, which is hardened, which protects the next thing, which is your Nexus Pass, badge identifier if you have Nexus on it. Then there's another pillar before you get to that booth. And I think they might have run right through those. We'll see. But that would cause the car to disassemble because there's nothing in the lane unless if there was another car in front of you. So it's a little hard to hit that booth sideways at any speed. So we'll see.
Hey, Sean, bring up the picture I posted. In the pill and put it in the nest.
In the pill.
I just posted it
Yeah,
up,
hang
I
on.
think. Is that the right one?
The one, let's see.
It looks like there's a car parked right in front of it.
Oh, you're talking about the secondary building, right? The one where the flame shoots all over it. Yeah, well, that's a kiosk, not the checkpoint, not the borders CBP's actual point.
Yeah, but
So
that's what's in the pictures, and the gas is flying over. Is that
right,
building
right.
there?
That's a secondary building. That's like it's a really light plastic building. And the officer stands out on a bay out in front of that thing. So the vehicle hit before that. There are pillars there, but how did the engine block get in front of the hard customs post building and the rest of the vehicle fly over it? I mean, there's a barrier that was hit at some point here. Like stuff bouncing off there. Okay. Well, it remains to be seen until we get really good video. But it's going to come out. It just feels insanely deliberate. And I'd hate to be the one to say it, but the closest major city is Toronto, and that is the epicenter of all the protests related to, because they have a very, very large um, Muslim, South Asian, and Arab community up there. I live I actually have a house in Montreal, and it's smaller than Toronto, their community, and that's all Franco-Arab communities up there. Large Orthodox Jewish community, but this feels like somebody in Toronto was coming to make a point. Still not a professional team, though.
Go ahead, Waypoint.
Yeah, hi, thanks very much. My experience in Northern Ireland, actually here in Hanover, I lost a very, very good friend, Smudge Smith, 2nd of July, 89, that he got blown up in they've driven up to it, and it's not actually a car bomb that's gone off by what I can see from it. I saw various Northern Ireland, in the UK, Northern Ireland, here in Germany as well. And I haven't actually seen anything there that I could say it looks like a typical, like, I it off as well. It doesn't look like anything like that. That's my first view. Haven't seen that many pictures, but just the initial picture that I've seen. Thanks.
I'd also add, for anybody that's in DC today, things are getting wild in DC as well. I just posted the nest. We had a shooting down by Metro Center, down towards the National Mall, about 5 blocks from the White House, involving U.S. Park Police and a suspect, both shot multiple times. They're attempting to land the Eagle life flight helicopter as the suspect has gone into cardiac arrest.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's called Wednesday, right?
Yeah, the big thing around this morning and this afternoon has been there's been a string of smash and grabs all over the city, and we've become so sarcastic and sort of dystopian here that everybody's joking that it's the criminals are trying to get stocked up before they hold their own Black Friday sales with stolen goods. Since most of the crime here in DC in terms of smash and grab is resale.
Go ahead, Harjeet.
Hey, Liberty, thanks for inviting me over. As we have moved to smash and grab, I think I might like to highlight another major issue which kind of blew me off in the morning today when we saw the Reuters report. I think the Financial Times report also came out that the U.S. government has the U.S. government has two potential, perpetrators or Indian government agents or assassins, whatever we want to call them, in custody and also indicted in New York, who were actually planning to murder an American on American soil. And the implication is that this is part of the larger conspiracy where there was a Canadian who was murdered, I think in June, on Canadian soil by Indian agents, allegedly, as Trudeau has pointed out. And not a big fan of Trudeau, but he is still the prime minister of that country. So if he's pointing out, it's the whole national security establishment of Canada, which is pointing a finger at India. So this is kind of, I think, continuation of those events, and pretty devastating, honestly. Like, I am enraged a bit, that we have foreign hostile government assassins roaming around on our soil, trying to murder our citizens. I don't have much respect for Canada. Sorry if there's any Canadian here, but this is America. We don't allow third world shitholes to kind of, start planning to kill Americans on American soil. And if they did it, which it seems they did it, they very well be ready for some consequences. So I don't know what have everybody else read here, or if not, I can fill you up with, the details of that story.
Well, have you gone over the Financial Times article on that?
No, I have. I wrote actually a detailed thread on it. I can put it up here for everybody's benefit. And
just so we're all clear, the man the Indian government is accused of trying to kill just 2 weeks ago threatened to blow up an airplane. So he did. This is on the back of this specific man making
how does that
terrorist
matter?
threats.
How does that matter here?
I don't, but I don't.
I'm
Daniel,
just putting this in perspective of what you're talking about. Competing narratives.
Hold on. I just so whether or not that person is on U.S. soil threatened to blow up a plane, he's still on U.S. soil.
Should be on this guy. One, the FBI should have taken this guy into.
That's what you think.
On American
that's
soil.
not what we think as Americans. Are you American?
I'm Canadian. He's threatening to blow up. He's a Canadian citizen too. He's a dual citizen.
See, the IDF released a video of a 10-minute walkthrough of the terror tunnels at Al Shifa.
I did see that. What were some of the takeaways on that?
I just saw it, so I don't know yet.
Do you have any takeaways from that? The new video from the IDF, Noga, about the terror tunnels under Al Shifa?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
I guess the IDF just released a video of them doing extensive searches of the tunnels under Al Shifa.
Yeah, we managed to get it open without anyone getting killed, which was not obvious, given the fact that Hamas has a tendency to booby trap everything, even dead bodies. So now we can explore, and it's a complicated situation. I wrote somewhere, this isn't an Indiana Jones movie. You have to be very, very careful when you go in. But they found more than 400 meters of tunnels under Shifa that they've already explored. That's what the movie is, to the best of my understanding. And, well, I don't think this is news to anyone. I mean, everybody and their grandmother knew exactly what was under Shifa Hospital. The amount of people who were saying, but you didn't prove it was there, was ridiculous to me. Everyone knew what was there. It was very, very obvious to everyone. And the UN knew about it. Palestinians knew about it. Doctors who went in knew about it. This was like the worst kept secret in the world. So the fact that we managed to show the tunnel system underneath it, I think I'm not even sure it's cherry on top. It was always going to happen. It was people. I think the pushback on the argument that we had to go in there was disingenuous to a ridiculous degree. It's almost like they were hoping that someone will blow up on the way in. Well, anyway, yeah, Shifa is a command and control center. It has at least 400 meters of tunnels under it specifically that we know of. There's a very, very large tunnel going into it that we discovered actually, 3 or 4 days ago. And again, this is something that was known. I actually posted a very, very long post saying that you've seen testimonies by doctors and patients and the terrorists that we apprehended and interrogated, and we showed you proof of an actual command and control center. We found computers and disks which if you've ever been to a command and control center, you know is what you expect to find in a command and control center. Very rarely do you have weapons in there, but we did find those as well. So at that point, it's like, yeah, that's why we had to go into what were you expecting? The Bat Cave? Apparently we found the Bat Cave because, again, 400 meters of tunnels. So, yeah.
What do you think of that, Malcolm? I know you have some experience with military operations. What do you think is the significance of finding that command center?
Well, it's all going to be significant. The biggest problem that I think the Israelis have now is when you get Ehud Olmert come out and say, "Oh yeah, back in the 2000s, you know, the Israelis built a hardened surgical center underneath that hospital, and it has a lead tunnel leading to it from the elevators." But I think this is significant. 10 minutes of walking, not walking, creeping along, right? Trying to go, you know, meter by meter and make sure that you're not getting shot, or whether it's on a dog or whether it's on a bomb robot. That's an extensive piece of terrain. You know, but it doesn't resolve the issue for the rest of the world. Half this world's not going to believe it anyway. You're going to have to find what they say is a real command post, Hamas Central. I've found command posts mainly in Iraq Iraq, Kuwait, places like that where, you know, it's very clearly where a commander operates from, and an operations center, and it's going to have lots of weapons equipment, and it's going to have been abandoned, right? Coffee maker's going to be, you know, turned off, things like that. So I think that
It was now. Hang on. You're describing the situation where someone was surprised and then ran away quickly.
no.
What we have, it's not coffee machines turned off because they've had 6 weeks to do this. They've had warning.
Malcolm, I'd like you to meet Noga. She's gonna tell you.
Okay.
She's a firecracker, ain't she, John?
She's a firecracker.
Yeah, I've heard her before. Yeah. They've got plenty.
No, but really, I'm asking you. They've had.
Let him finish. He's gonna tell you.
We'll come to you, Noga.
One thing I know, you know, I mean, I just spent a year fighting with the Ukrainian army against the Russians. There's always going to be a watch section left there, right? One guy, two guys to trip wire when the Israelis are coming, to know, you know, maintain that space in case they can reoccupy it, you know, keep the toilets running. I don't know. But there's always going to be a man at the end of the tunnel, and some guy who's going to need a place to sleep and lay up before they abandon something along that lines. So, you know, the tunnels of Cu Chi in Vietnam were manned from the beginning of the war to the end of the war, despite the fact that we had put in one operation 20,000 troops and the next one 30,000 troops, and couldn't even start to crack the top 5% of that tunnel complex. Now you can pay, you know, $5 and go down into it. So we'll see how extensive it is. I'm sure it's extensive. I'm just hoping the IDF, the ISAF, broke enough of those links to where no one's there, because no one could survive there anymore. They couldn't, you know, move over to a secondary or tertiary tunnel cross section, and had trapped everybody else behind it. Right. That's the key hope here.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree that even in a 10-minute video, it takes you to portions that were collapsed by Hamas beforehand. And a lot of the points, like the wiring, the size of a room, the sleeping area, the kitchen, the bathroom. I mean, I've seen enough. Plus the tunnels themselves, the shafts, those are very indicative Hamas tunnels with the concrete sections and slabs, the archways that aren't, you know, the Syrian Girl Israel built bunker with tunnel connections from the 80s. This, from my expertise, it is Hamas built, but we'll wait and see. Like, I'd love some international media in there on top of the IDF, but as the IDF in that 10-minute video walk you through all the rooms and the wiring, the power, the phone, the lighting, so I actually did something for Wall Street Journal. They actually published it already, and now they're going to update it based on today's release, where I was saying that, you know, the weapons, the clothing, the tunnel shaft prior to the blast door was enough to say it was a headquarters. Now, you know, there's different sizes, right? You know, from platoon to brigade. As more and more is revealing the size of this under the hospital with connections to basically it goes out to other areas, but just the size of the rooms and everything that everybody was demanding Israel show to validate what they said before the operation. It's not like they struck it and they have to justify the operation, but before executing the operation and then backed by U.S. intelligence, like, hey, you got to show the world, that video that was just released is a major portion to, yes, okay, a lot more is leading to you were right. And there's still more to be shown. Like Malcolm said, they collapsed portions. Clearly they wiped it clean. In the 4+ weeks before the IDF even got close to it, and since the IDF had to signal we're headed here, these are the reasons we're heading here, which is kind of in a very tie your hands behind your back if you want to reveal like maps on the walls, radios, things like that. Although they still left weapons and things in the Shifa complex.
Go ahead, Noga.
And I wanted to ask about that. What Barak said, and I actually listened to his conversation with Christiane Amanpour twice just to make sure, because I'm not his biggest fan, to say the least. But what he said was that when Israel built the Shifa hospital, we also built the basement under it. That's what he said. That's all he said, which would make sense, because when you build a building, you start with the base and you build up. I have no idea how we got from there to Israel built the tunnels. I can't figure it out.
It's called Syrian Girl.
Yeah, but it used to be that when you lied, you at least try to. It was supposed to make sense at some. He didn't. It wasn't even close to what he said.
The kernel of the truth is that there's a basement, yes, in the Shifa hospital, and then
there's a basement in Shifa. It was supposed to be used for treatment of patient or for storing of, which is what you do in a hospital building. I can't. Israel built the tunnels, really? I don't even know. What were you supposed? Let's assume for a second it's true, but it's 100% not. But then what? It's like I keep hearing this argument of Israel made Hamas stronger. No, guys, and the dog didn't eat your homework either. Nobody made you become a terrorist. That's not how it works. It just isn't. What's the point of the argument? It's like it's this, and I'm asking, what using it in any way, shape, or form? I don't get it. It's like lying for the sake of lying and obfuscating, so we never understand what the conversation actually is. Is that the point? Really, I'm asking.
I would say that is the point. That's been the point for years. Look at the logical inconsistency of every single conversation we have about. Most people are under the impression that if one army is stronger than the other army, they have to fight with one hand tied behind their back. And if they don't, that's a war crime.
Defense if it's not a country. Now, and she was quoting a specific article from the UN Charter that says the exact opposite. And it's like, this is someone you and I are paying for. Okay, I'm an international taxpayer. Okay, the UN's budget comes out of your pocket, comes out of my pocket. We're paying for this bullshit, and I don't understand people who have positions like this one. And even if you have an agenda and you want to push it, that's fine. But how do you not understand the unintended consequences involved? How do you not understand that when you strip the international agreements from their basic tenets and their most basic logic, you create mayhem? You're not helping the weak. The system is built so that the strong won't overwhelm the weak. If you break the system down, by definition, you are hurting the people you want to help. Why do they not realize that?
I mean, it's separate case. Back to the hospital. I actually agreed with Israel. Said it was a major with the 3D rendering Hamas headquarters. You had to show that, and I think Israel at this point now has shown it, with more to come.
I agree that there's more to come, but I've actually, that's another question I want to ask. Israel has to show that? Really? That's how we're waging war these days? You have to
Yeah, I mean,
prove that. No. I'll explain what I'm asking. Let's assume for a second that you think, I know for a fact, because we've already seen all of the evidence that that's what was there. And I'm not saying otherwise, but let's assume for a second that you think that there's a terrorist hiding in a building. And that's why you bombed the building. And this terrorist is very important. It's Osama bin Laden, okay? And you're bombing the building because you're trying to get rid of Osama bin Laden. And then you find out that Osama bin Laden wasn't there and your intelligence was wrong. Are you less justified in what you did because the intelligence was wrong?
yes.
Explain.
I mean, war is more than just the legal aspects. There is the court of public opinion, and that matters in maintaining wars. Wars have been, the U.S. military was defeated strategically in the first Battle of Fallujah. The court of public opinion matters greatly. So legality is absolutely primal, but the court of perception. So if you, like in a war where you have multiple things where you made multiple mistakes, and then the court of international opinion can say, look, this needs to stop. In order to maintain the will of the population, your own, your government, and your people, and then the international community, you have to be on the side of right consistently. Yes.
I don't disagree that you have to be on the side of right. I disagree with the characterization of making a mistake or having the intelligence change in the middle as not being the side of right.
No, so it isn't that if your intelligence is bad, you'd be wrong. I mean, I don't want to bring in, because I hate people bringing in weapons of mass destruction, but yeah, there is an ability of, with the information you have at the time, you made a decision. You weren't trying to fool somebody, but you were wrong. It does establish a moment, which if you keep doing it, then it makes everybody question your intelligence gathering capability. So when you say I struck this because there were enemy fighters, like, you're just making this up. You're just indiscriminately killing people. It really matters.
Right. Thank you, Colonel. This whole
Oh, here we go.
yeah, I know this whole car bomb situations. I get
Oh, here we go. Craig,
Well,
I want to hear this.
I always feel like I'm the last guy to the coffee meeting, and everybody's like, "Oh, here's Craig. What's he gonna say?" I don't think
At least you're allowed in the meeting. Some people I won't let in the meeting if I was in control of the meeting.
Fair enough. No, I mean, I always feel comfortable talking in front of Colonel Spencer because I think I'm getting more and more intellectually on his level. But in regards to the car bombing, I'll save that for a second. But I just wanted to say something in regards to what Noga has said. I think it's really important for everybody to understand that the lie is the point. The point is the lie. Right? Because people have to understand that the vast majority of people in the United States are not dialed in on the facts, right? They skim over them, they look through them, they look through social media, and then they move on with their life, right? Attention span of a fruit fly. And so you need to have both arguments out there simultaneously with the truth in order to compete in the marketplace of ideas the way that Colonel Spencer just outlined. So you have to remember that the lying is the point. It is the strategy to lie, right? It's like Nazis in Ukraine. It's like, all this other crap, right? It's not meant to tell the truth because you have to compete in the marketplace. And that means that if you're competing against something that's a really, really high quality, right? Like the truth, then guess what? Then you have to you have to compete in the marketplace of ideas with the cheapest possible thing, and you have to market it at volume, right? And so you just have to throw a lot of stuff out there. And so that's the point. You can't compete at the qualitative level. So you compete at the quantitative level of information. And so the more you can.
But lying is faster.
Yeah, that's what
you said. It has to be at the same time. But the problem is that lying is faster.
Well,
by definition.
Agree, but you can't just say, "Hey, that lie, that's false. I'm just gonna let it go."
No, I understand that, and I think I've spent quite a lot of time the last 6 weeks,
I know,
trying
I
to
know.
pick lies apart. But the thing is that you guys are describing a given that is problematic. I mean, because people have the attention span of a gnat. I'm not arguing that, but there's an inherent problem with that because this system is prone to accept lies faster just because they come in
Well,
faster. They
well,
don't even
no.
have to make
You
sense
can't.
anymore.
Yeah, but you can't. But nobody can stop me. So think about it this way: if I wanted to go out there right now and say that the grass is blue, nobody can control me. That's freedom of speech, right? I can say that and believe it and put it and run for office on that platform, right? And I can do it right now because a lie is an imaginative lie. If you are constrained within the truth, right? If that is your fenced-in area, right? If that is your operational space, is the truth, then there is no initial forward lean from that, right? Because something happens at a hospital, like let's say somebody claims Israel bombed a hospital, right? If you're living within the fence of truth and you think that is where you want to live, then you have to wait for the facts to come out, right? You have to wait to get the knowledge of it. You see the hospital, you look at the explosion, you do this. Okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to go out there and lie. I'm going to wait and I'm going to see just what the facts tell me. If something goes off at a hospital, nobody can stop you from going out there and saying 2,000 people just died and Israel did it and Netanyahu was there and he planted the bomb. He did it. Like, there is a natural advantage to lying because you don't have to wait for the truth, right? That's the whole point. But in regards to the hospital bombing, or excuse me, the hospital, geez Louise, in regards to the bombing that I saw there, at the border crossing, I can't tell. Maybe somebody else can tell, but that explosion looks like a fireball. I don't see a.
You missed like 2 hours of conversation, Craig.
Yeah, there we go. So
he's always late to the party. He's like,
With
he never
the
apologizes
world's leading
either.
experts. There's Malcolm's here. Yes. So
my question
yes.
is. My question is. I've seen the video. I'm currently in hour 6 of a 7-hour drive for Thanksgiving. So when I look at that explosion, number one, I don't see a concussive wave against any of the buildings. I don't see any. I don't see large fragmentations go out in any kind of directed way. I see a large fireball, which is indicative of an accelerant that is more fluid than it is solid. So see less syntax, more gasoline fire. I mean, somebody else can kind of help fill in the gaps for me, but I don't see a directed. I'm not claiming there isn't a terrorist attack, but can somebody kind of fill me in on the explosives here, or what was used, or what's going on? Because I don't see, that kind of concussive wave or anything like that.
You want to give him the rundown, Malcolm?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just talking about the explosives used on at the border.
Yeah, well, again, I'm getting all sorts of conflicting data. Can anyone definitively say that the car was on the Canadian side or the U.S. side?
It's now appearing that it was on the U.S. side and it was
inbound Canada,
diverted into the secondary screening.
So the vehicle originated in the United States.
And maybe I've not seen. I've seen both reported, but I'm increasingly seeing people say that it was on the U.S. side. Whether that means it originated in the U.S. is not clear.
Yeah, because that would be, if he was going towards Canada, then he'd be diverted into the Canadian checkpoint. This is very confusing. And again, do we know it's an explosive or just explosive impact?
There you go. That was my question.
Gas tanks fly. Gas tanks, they explode on spark, and it shows that flame just flying all over the place. But it lasts just a moment. No real, high order, even low order blast effect. It's not like it was a black powder full of black powder and propane tanks.
You see, Colonel Spencer, I do know what I'm talking about sometimes.
You just got insulted by Malcolm Nance.
No, that's a joke.
I don't think me and Malcolm spent enough time together to insult each other, but I'll certainly
we did
take
anyway.
it for what it is. I guess so.
Look, John Spencer and I have drunk together in Ukraine, so there's no insults out here. Just all experts sharing our info, right?
Yep. Malcolm brought me a stuffed javelin and a stuffed TB2 and Lviv at the very beginning of the war that my kids cherish. He's a dear friend and
A
a world
stuffed
renowned expert.
javelin?
Oh,
Yeah,
you can only get them in
That sounds
yeah,
Ukraine.
awesome.
yeah, and a TB2 Baraktar
Malcolm, I
from
want one, Malcolm.
Now I think you can find them on Etsy, but now they have a really great one. They have a stinger, stuffed stinger, that is
Oh
a
my god.
travel pillow that connects together around your neck.
So my question is, Colonel Spencer, how come when you came back from Ukraine, you didn't get me a stuffed train?
I brought back a Maria plane for my daughter. I buy stuff for my kids, not you, Craig.
He needs logistics, John. You need to get him tractors and stuff. He misses it so much.
They got
Can't get the
tractors.
bracelet. I got this last week. I brought back the bracelet that are made from destroyed tanks from the Battle of Kiev.
Those are cool.
Whatever
I got one of those off Etsy.
Yeah,
whatever happened to the last Azov
yeah.
steel plant? Yeah,
They
whatever
sold
happened to
like
that?
1,000 of those bracelets. I never got one. Malcolm, you got one?
Ah,
Negative.
Yeah, I need one. I my plan is to go when it's liberated to go and get my own. But yeah, there are about 1,000 of those sold. I got a first run of the stamp. The go F yourself stamp and a second run of it.
It's me on it saying what now is.
What? Oh, I remember you talking about that, but I didn't.
When I went there, and but I those are going to be hot items. Malcolm Nance's face on a Ukra stamp.
Well, I got to
what?
meet with Budon. Oh, I did. No, that's the funny thing. I took a picture with him, and everybody said smile, and I said Budon doesn't smile. And he's like, I
Yeah,
am
I
smiling.
am
But you
smiling.
look at the picture, he's not. He's not smiling.
Can I ask
Go
you,
ahead.
Malcolm?
Yeah.
Malcolm, we'll be have you in the space, and we're just focusing on just for Ukraine for just a second. I had a question for you in regard to that Southern Front offensive.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that's been tickling my brain for a while, as I'm sure Colonel Spencer will illustrate for you later. I'm kind of a logistics guy, right? Just numbers and how many tons fit on how many trucks on how many train rails, running so many hours a day, right?
Right.
The question that I have been going over and over again is, there is something about that Southern offensive that when I just look at just the numbers, that's OSINT, just whatever's published, and just kind of, maybe adding 15% or subtracting 15% for a given thing. Can you explain to me, or maybe this is true, but when that Southern offensive kicked off, I did not see, whether it's from videos or from Telegram channels or whatever, an overwhelming mass of artillery fire at jump off, at kickoff, and a sustained focus on that one node of the Southern Front, right? Overwhelming firepower. You have to stay in your trench or you're going to die.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through that? Was that an ammunition shortage? Was that deception? Like, give me your 2 cents on that.
I can now tell you guys what I know about the counteroffensive because I was pre-briefed and by Minister Reznikov. So here's what I learned. When I spoke to him, he knew that I was part of the Kharkiv offensive in 2020 and 2021, 2022. And what he said was, it's not going to be like your offensive. It's not going to be a lightning blitz. And the way that they described it was the Russian line. The way that they described it was the Russian line is a steel and deeper But this is another thing. The Russians didn't plant these minefields this year. They started last October, right at the end of the Kharkiv offensive. They created all of the, the Dragon's Teeth, and started laying very in-depth minefields all winter. So the Ukrainians, General Zaluzhny, Sersky, they all knew, and Pavlyuk, they all knew what they were going into. They knew it would be a push. The push's objective was to get that steel birder from Kherson all the way up to Bakhmut to break somewhere. And they started what we called the counter battery campaign. And that's when they really went to town on the Russians. June to August, just artillery against artillery. But it wasn't, you guys, I think, think about how the Ukrainians and the Russians do artillery from World War II. I've been bombarded a lot. And one of the things I noticed about Russian artillery was, unless they really saw you and the forward observer had a line out or they had a drone on you, you didn't get hit, with as much artillery as I thought we would get hit with. We actually, when we took East Kupiansk, we determined that they were actually shooting by watch section in the shape of a Z. I mean, like somebody had drawn a Z on a map, and we knew when it would come, at an angle near us and then miss us and then the bottom leg. It was weird. But sustained artillery was only happening in places where they needed it. Bakhmut, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, where they were leveling the cities, leveling these towns. And that was World War II level, loads of day and night artillery. But the Ukrainians are surgical about it. They knew that to kill Russian overmatch, they needed to go after every tube they could get their hands on. So using the like the TIPS 36 radars and some of these other counter battery radars, and they have a really good, persistent, long range drone surveillance that we don't talk about much, but that's where you get all those great videos from. And these aren't hand-launched drones, that they can really see where the Russian artillery is. And they went after it. Then in August came the really big, mechanized pushes after the failed first push in June. So I think they're still pressing on the girder. And now you're seeing surprises like, taking the east bank of the Dnipro and really making a bridgehead there. But back to your logistics, right? Here's one thing that I did not see that I saw in like Desert Storm and Iraq and all these other places was, 500 miles of logistics trucks bringing in artillery and food and all these things. There are marshaling points in the major cities near them, and that's where that stuff is offloaded. So it's actually, as a logistician, you'd be really frustrated because you would expect to see that the D+5 at Normandy, right? All these vehicles going in large conga lines to the front. They have a really dispersed distribution system. But the artillery, they get the tubes that they need. They get the rounds that they need. Those units, they've taken a lot of, some interesting losses, especially with the M777s. Battle picture. And then in August, they really went to town on long-range shoots against the Russian rear. So the Ukrainians have a strategy. And they have very good officers.
So let me just drill down on the logistics question just for 1 second. Mm-hmm. These aid packages that we've seen gone out, you always see mm-hmm. small arms, ammunition, shells, this and that, and this and that, because they have such a dispersed logistician system, because they're brigades, because they don't have a divisional system. To my understanding, it's corps then brigade, right? Right. By that nature, it has to be dispersed because of the maneuverability or the desired maneuverability of the brigades. So wouldn't you at least like to see more HETMETs, more Oshkosh, more forward carrying multi-ton vehicles that have intermodal transport where it's a crane, you drop and you go, that sort of thing, rather than this you take a train to downtown wherever and then you got a deuce and a half, right? I mean, in my mind, I feel
Right.
like 200 HETMETs are more valuable than 200 tanks at this point to keep operations sustained, right? I mean, that's just
Yeah,
what I think.
John Spencer will tell you this because I'm sure he's seen this. And this is the beautiful thing. During the first 6 months of the war, I saw virtually no military vehicle convoys. In the 3 weeks leading up to the invasion, day and night, I drove everywhere in Ukraine. I saw no vehicle convoys because I was looking for the wrong thing. They use civil transport with cloth side panels that come from the marshalling points in Poland and around the western border that are escorted by police cars to bring high value things in, right? Like you're not going to see a HEMARS on the back of a truck out in the open. You're going to see that on the back of a heavy transporter that might be civil. Now, I did see a lot of the HETMETs coming in. When they came in, the MRAPs, they drove them straight from the border, right? Operational that very minute. But the large bulk of ammunition that's coming in is coming in on Sayev that was actually reporting for the Russians. So they try to keep this as generic as possible, right? A giant, massive national shell game. And then it gets to their distribution points and it's broken down off the pallets and then it gets put into, transporters and bongos and things like that and
That
gets
is
taken out.
incredibly inefficient. That's
Yeah,
that's
but guess
it's
what?
really
It
inefficient.
works.
Yeah,
The
fair
thing
enough.
is
Fair
that
enough.
we think it should run like us. I was in Desert Storm. One of the most amazing facets of Devil's Desert Storm, and the commander of the logistics force wrote a book about it. Was the most well supplied multinational army in history, quite possibly since definitely better than World War II. And one time when they were transitioning from Humvees to Cut V's, right, the Chevy Blazer to Humvees, they came up to I was with an EOD unit, and they were like, "If you guys want 6." Now, how many months are we at? 22, 23, some odd months, and they have adapted that system to flow well. But we think it should be like 500 HETMETs with modular packages going and just dropping those things off the cranes and then rolling back to a central hub. Yeah, that's not working for them.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very
Hmm.
good insight. Much obliged.
Yeah.
Thanks for stealing the conversation, Craig.
It's okay. You can have it back. I was just borrowing it, but you guys can have it back.
Hey, James is a good friend of the space. James, I'm not running the space, but I'm just saying.
I just was waiting to all the logistics talks to end. We got used to it, John. We get that every time. Every time Craig is here. I love you, Craig. I wanted to bring up our friend Omar, who is very good in Syria and very active in Syria, has posted, and I posted it in the Nest. There has been a huge airstrike against near the Syrian capital in Damascus on an Iranian-backed militia. He claims it's the IDF, IAF, but I'm not sure yet, so I don't want to talk about that, about who the attack, but there is a huge attack in that region. And it seems that those escalations are in line with what usually happens just before a ceasefire from both sides. So just pointing that out. And we had a question from the people in the audience. I received this message. Someone is asking about the intelligence related to the tunnels, and why didn't the tunnels or why didn't they show the tunnels before if they knew that they had tunnels there based on intelligence or past intelligence? It's a generic questions. Maybe we can go back to Gaza and the
If
issues
everyone
of
can
the.
go ahead and like and retweet the space, that would be really appreciated. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to this wonderful panel for coming. Follow all of the people on the panel and the co-hosts. They're all great people.
Well, my non-expertise answer to his question is, look what it took to get to Al Shifa Hospital. And so going in 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago to destroy those tunnels would have been an unprovoked act of war per se. And you would have had to fight your way through the city just to get to El Shifa. So I don't think the political will was there to do it 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. John, what do you think?
I'm glad you answered first, because that's not what I got from. I got it from why didn't you show? I thought it was more of like, why did it take you this long to show if your intelligence said it was there, with an understanding how long it takes to clear. You don't want to burn intelligence sources, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm fine if that was the question. That your answer was good. Absolutely.
No, I think the question was closer to yours, John. Your understanding. Sorry if I wasn't clear. So it was closer to why, based on the intelligence that they have, it took this long, and you started answering with the clearance and all those subjects. So they would like to know about those
Yeah, I
information.
mean, yeah, that's a lot easier. And in Malcolm, I love your opinion on that, based on. I mean, the fact that one, it wasn't a single building; it was a complex. You had to secure the complex, seize a foothold, clear that building, and I agree that they were rushing to get information out. Now, the tunnel complexes, they can't just go to a building, find an entrance, and say, okay, let's go down that entrance. And what we've seen the IDF do is like they find either a non-primary entrance or they dig their own entrance. And then the amount of work, like we've seen all the various drones that we're sending in first to clear a tunnel, because the worst case scenario would have worked against Israel's, again, will perception is for an explosion to have happened at Al Shifa with patients still in the main hospital, with all the attention. That would have been the worst case scenario. We don't know what was, so even like the blast door, like they showed us, and everybody doubted, like, oh, all of you've shown us is 300 meters, or not even like 50 meters. That's all you've shown us is 50 meters. You're it's a sham, and like the lie just was able to perpetuate. But now, if you watch the videos, I'm actually looking at it right now. I mean, a giant hole was dug to dig access to an access point. All that had to be cleared, and yes, that's the amount of time in order to preserve it that was required. And I'm sure there are other political aspects that, to include the hostage negotiation discussion, like all these other things that factor in. But mainly from a military perspective, is that you had to clear it with the extreme risk, more so than any other tunnel probably ever found, of not allowing it to be destroyed, or the fighter down there with the button, like Malcolm said, with the stay behind, like all those variables. So the fact that we all said that's what the intelligence said, and I actually said in the Wall Street Journal, like, Israel has to show it. And I know that Noga doesn't like that, but you have to show that it was a significant, especially after that 3D rendering. But that's the way
I don't think I wasn't necessarily saying you don't have to show. I understand the discussion.
Yeah.
I was asking if there's a better way to do it, because it feels like there's a phrase in Hebrew. It's mishpat sadeh. That I'm sure there's a phrase in English for it. I just don't know it. But it's what happens when like a soldier betrays his unit and you don't have time because it's war. So you will try him in the field rather than bring him back home. It's not a good. It describes a trial that shouldn't happen. I mean, it's not exactly a lynch, but like for us, it basically means it's not mock trial. It's something that shouldn't happen, because a trial is something you should weigh and you should measure, and it shouldn't happen just because you're in the heat of the battle and you're trying to get rid of a traitor. Okay, that is what that sentence pretty much describes, and it
All right.
feels like that's sort of what's happening right now, because arguing it didn't really take that long. It took less than a week to show like a body of evidence that people are still challenging, but to show a significant body of evidence. But it feels like you're being constantly attacked and you're being constantly challenged at every step of the way. And I was like, could you wait a couple of days? There's a problem with the way that it's being done. I think waiting a few days for the evidence to come in should be part and parcel of the system, because again, lying is what doesn't take time. Lying is easy. I actually had someone tell me that the fact that it takes Israel longer to say how many casualties it has, that's an indication that Israel's lying, because it takes longer to make numbers up. Now, I don't understand. Honestly, no, it doesn't. But understanding that the truth takes time, and the trials are something that takes time, and it isn't a public opinion trial what's going on right now. And I get it, but again, it should be measured. I would expect anyone who has any sort of reference to the truth to wait before they pass judgment. I would expect at least you know what? I would expect the BBC, when they read something so ridiculous, like Israel is targeting Arab speakers in the Gaza Strip, to stop and realize that they did something wrong on the spot. Not for Israel to come ask them, "Are you kidding me?" a few hours later. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? And I don't know if anyone has been following this and they know and you know what I'm talking about, but the BBC was given a Reuters piece that was saying that when Israel went into the Shifa hospital, which we did not bomb, we did go in with medical staff and Arab speakers, like translators and incubators. And what the BBC made of that was that we were deliberately targeting Arab speakers, which is ridiculous because that's what you have in the Gaza Strip, and medical staff, which again is what you have in Shifa Hospital. And it didn't even occur to them to stop and realize that there was something wrong with that. They had no problem passing judgment as they were reading it. And I think that's insane.
Malcolm, any thoughts on the tunnel complex and how fast the information was let out versus the
Yeah.
of the world?
Yeah. Here's where Noga, you can get mad. I think the Israelis suck at social media. They are not the Ukrainians, right?
I agree.
Oh my God, they're
I
so bad,
agree.
because when they came through and they breached the northern and northeastern sectors of the fence, they were hitting tunnels left and right. We saw videos of Hamas fighters popping up, all right, and doing the full Vietnamese, coming out, putting an RPG into a vehicle, and then dropping back down and them having gun battles. Those are the tunnels you really should concern yourself about, right? Hamas claimed that they had 500 kilometers of tunnels. The place is only 41 kilometers long. For them to have 500 kilometers of tunnels, they would have needed to have 4 or 5 parallel tunnels that went all the way from the northern sector to the southern sector, and then went 3 layers deep, and then with cross sections to where the whole place was latticed like an ant farm. I don't know if that exists. That might be just propaganda. Might be 50 kilometers, might be 100 kilometers of combined length. But here's the problem. The IDF responded to this so poorly that they thought, like when they went into the Prince Naif, MRI center and found all those guys with their go bags, which told me nobody reported to duty, right? Well, that jihad team was not coming to get shot, or maybe they died in air raids beforehand. That is not an aha moment for the world, So this is the biggest problem here is the IDF should have just kept their mouths shut until they had cleared, held, and could bring, Nick Robinson and Richard Engel down into those tunnels, don't touch nothing except for sensitive site exploitation of immediate use of intelligence materials, which is maps and everything. One of the first things I saw was a sectored off map that used English numbers. And they said, oh, we have a battle map overlay here. And people were like, well, no, the Israelis just drew that. Don't stick to video of them in intense combat, which is explained on air. I was on LBC, London Broadcasting, that the reason they haven't entered Al-Shifa Hospital and there's a lot of shooting and bangy going on is because they are fighting Hamas in the neighborhood. And they aren't shooting civilians. When you have a full combat load of, let's say, 10, 30-round magazines, which was my standard combat load in Ukraine when I had an M4, that goes fast in an urban or village environment. John Spencer will tell you, I'm not shooting at any civilians when my last 3 rounds might be the only thing, until somebody can run up a resupply bag or a speedball that gets dropped to us. I'm not going to be shooting off everything, and I'm not going to be shooting civilians. The IDF doesn't explain any of that. They barely tell us that they're at war. So that's why Shifa Hospital was dominated by foreign media making projections on what's actually going on.
You won't hear
So,
another word from me about Israel's social media abilities, because while we seem to be good at dealing with the military aspects of Hamas, the more complicated, like look at I'm appalled by the hostage deal that was just reached. I mean, it seems like we can handle the technical aspects of this of tactics quite well, but the strategy, I'm sorry, the deal on the table at the moment that is about to go through is insane in terms of the level of risk it poses to the hostages themselves, to IDF soldiers, to Israel at large. It increases the incentive to do this again. I mean, it's ridiculous. So in terms of the psychological aspects of the war, be it with public opinion or with Hamas, we're not good at that at all.
What you need to point out also, no, guys, the fact that MBS talked, which is very weird, and what he talked about is also very important, which seems to redirect to a discussion we had yesterday about the fact that this ceasefire might turn into something more and more permanent. I know Israeli don't like us to say that, but it seems like something on a more permanent or long-term level has been achieved, and there's some other negotiations
I'm
going.
sorry, where are you getting that from?
MBS has talked. The fact that MBS have asked people not to send weapons anymore, it's the first time he publicly talks like completely against the Israel, which is weird. Like, why would he come and talk now just before the ceasefire? I don't know if you saw the video. Okay.
I haven't seen the video, but it's not the first time it's talked. If memory serves, but I'm gonna take your word on that. I don't know. I think Israeli decision makers miscalculated if they think that's gonna work. I mean, if either the U.S., anyone in the Gulf, or Israeli leaders think that they could get away with not resuming after the fact that we lost, I think it's almost 100 soldiers in combat at the moment, not to mention 1,200 people originally, not to mention the fact that we still have more hostages there after this. Anyone who thinks the Israeli public is going to stand for it has grossly underestimated the level of rage here. Netanyahu is not going to survive this politically if that's what happens. None of the leaders there, like the only person in the war cabinet that doesn't care because he wasn't elected in the first place, is Eisenkot. I understand that there's but I think that anyone who would assume that miscalculates the shift in public opinion in Israel about this. This isn't thinking that we're done when we have 22 villages who've been evacuated from there, from the border alone. But actually, since we evacuated 7 kilometers in, there's more like 30. And they have to be rebuilt. Some of them actually need rebuilding. Others just need repopulation. Like, people need to come back home. People want to come back home. And you can't do that if you don't finish what you started.
Yeah,
It's
I agree, but the discussion we had yesterday, sorry to cut you off, it was with multiple people, Israeli, non-Israeli, people from different like level of understanding of the situation, deep and not deep, was that it might be also, and M was here too, and he brought that up, that it might be the way for them to lead to a deal where Hamas gives up all the hostages over time, like over the next 15 days, 20 days, and their leadership leaves for Qatar to be judged or
yeah, I
something.
heard that.
Yeah.
I would, again, even if Hamas, I've heard that as well. I don't think that's on the table from the way that the deal is constructed at the moment. But even if it was, like, it wouldn't be enough. The Gaza needs to be demilitarized and de-radicalized for Israel to resume. And I think you have to understand that there are undercurrents in Israeli public opinion as well. And the people who were making decisions up until now, and I'm actually not talking about Netanyahu, I'm talking about like regular, high-level generals and judges are not going to be doing it when the war is over. And so you have to see the shift, and it's not an easy shift for Israel to make, but I doubt very much if any elected official, and honestly a lot of the appointed ones, will be able to hold on to their chair if we can't resume, if we can't go back home. And for me, it's personal. It really is my home. This is I was born in one of the kibbutzim that was evacuated. I have some stuff left in my mom's home that I want back. But it's not just the residents. Israelis will not stand for being removed from their homes, and you should have seen those kibbutzim. They're like honestly gorgeous. We want our homes back, and you won't be able to finish the war until that happens. And Israel, I'm not sure leadership, but again, I'm baffled by the decision to go for this particular deal. But Israelis will not stand for this.
So, Noga, can I
And then
co-host?
I want to shift this back really fast.
Okay, so my question for Malcolm, because he's, very well versed into this. If you're striking a deal, right? Like, obviously, it's a bad deal. What would be the alternative that you are trying to avoid in this case? Like, what would be worse than that? Or what would be the thinking of something better that would come out of it, in your opinion?
Well, first, there's only really one alternative, and that is 241 dead hostages. So you're going to have to make a deal. I was in Doha. I landed in Doha, I think, at D+3. That's 3 days after the attack. And right in front of me was Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin landing in their respective aircraft. And I went on to Dubai, and they went there also to Abu Dhabi. It was immediate that the United States were enlisting the Qataris from go to get these hostages out, because the Qataris have the Hamas headquarters there, senior leadership, and they have the cachet that the Saudis don't. No one's going to listen to Mohammed bin Salman. I actually made a proposal very early on that the Saudis could take this situation away from the Qataris by offering Hamas complete removal of all of the Hamas prisoners, bring them to Saudi Arabia, put them permanently in exile into Mecca, like they did Idi Amin, right, on a permanent Umrah, and then bring all the hostages to Medina as a symbol of good faith, and they would be the big dog in the Middle East from that point onward. But they don't want to be. They don't want to be involved, other than the lip service and their Abraham's Accord work. So Qatar has stepped up to the plate. They have access to Hamas. They had access to the CIA director, the Mossad director, and this deal has been worked out. Is it a good deal? Well, it's good for 50 hostages, and that's good. But Noga's right. All right, this war is not about getting the hostages out. I'm going to be honest with you. I've worked around the Israelis since 1983 was the first time I was in Lebanon with the Israelis, and they're interesting characters. I lived in Israel for a while. They are going for the eradication of Hamas. There's not going to be any let Hamas reconsolidate. Let's not fly out 300 of their top commanders and leave the foot soldiers. They're going to die to a man. Done. And they need to. Largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. No one's letting this slide. This isn't a suicide bomber in a Jerusalem cafe, or the guy who stabbed people in the bus in Ashdod or Tel Aviv. No, this is mass murder, and Israel has to have it avenged and washed in blood before anyone will allow anyone to talk anymore about the future. It's just the way
All
it
right,
is.
thank you very much, Malcolm. Daniel, do you have any more updates on the car attack or accident?
No updates on the car or whatever. I wanted to somewhat respond to the first part of what Malcolm
Okay,
said, but
go ahead.
I can wait. Yeah, listen, I think the second half was correct. Malcolm's right. I mean, Hamas has to be destroyed here. I disagree with the notion that you have to negotiate through Qatar in the way that you negotiated. I mean, I think the notion that no one respects Mohammed bin Salman is in the Middle East, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is incorrect. I'll say the least. And the legitimacy, quote unquote, of Qatar is not because they're these great mediators. It's because they have tons and tons of money, and they have tons and tons of economic influence in the West, and they support Hamas. Their legitimacy with Hamas is because they support them. They give them financial aid. And in my view, they were complicit in October 7th. The way you can negotiate with Hamas through Qatar is you start making threats to Qatar, saying, hey, we'll revoke your non-NATO ally status if you don't give up the Hamas leaders, and we'll give the Israeli Mossad sanction to take them out on your home base if you don't do that. So if you were to put pressure on Hamas, Qatar, Iran, and all the people responsible for it, and if you actually put pressure on them, you could extract hostages through more important pressure. But instead, the Biden administration is doing the exact opposite. It just gave another $10 billion to Iran, so to help beef up the Houthis and Hezbollah in Israel's north, and smuggle some more money to PIJ, and is helping out. I mean, the Biden administration is clearly helping Hamas's negotiation position and undermining Israel's. So, and the notion that, the solution is for Saudi Arabia to just take all what Hamas calls, quote unquote, their hostages, the prisoners. Well, these people are all hardened terrorists. These aren't 12-year-olds in prison for throwing a rock. No one there is under 16. They've all been caught and prosecuted in stabbing or car rammings or other types of terrorism. And the Saudis don't want to take, thousands of terrorists just onto their soil. For fun? So they can be seen as legitimate by who? And if again, you would, whatever you gained in quote unquote legitimacy from the establishment, media and political class in the West, you would lose in legitimacy in the Middle East for being so monumentally stupid and taking all those terrorists onto your soil. That would undermine their position with their own allies. So the notion that we just have to, we have to give them whatever they want. And Noga's right. This incentivizes more terrorism. The Gilad Shalit exchange was a disaster. It was the inspiration for October 7th. It means Palestinians now know that when they go to commit mass casualty attacks, drag some hostages back, so you can, leverage the international community to get more resources to do more jihad. It's the notion that we can't put pressure on the allies of Hamas vis-a-vis Iran, the Quds Force, all their proxies, and Qatar, I think is silly. We just have this notion that we can't
would go after Qatar. Like, why? What's the worst that's going to happen? Like, oh, Qatar stops, funding money, stops throwing billions into our economy to undermine Western civilization through whatever they're doing. Great, that's a win. So this notion that we can't put pressure on Qatar, and Qatar is some sort of, noble mediator that's on everyone's side and the true adults of the room, it's farcical. They're jihadi money laundering scheme on a bunch of on top of a natural gas deposit. Like, let's not treat it like it's anything else. It's also a slave state. It's also most of the people in Qatar are slaves. Why are we pretending this is a legitimate negotiating partner for anyone?
Actually, it's not completely true. That Qatar, yes, they are involved. Yes, they have involvement, but they have been considered for a while the central point, like the Switzerland in terms of negotiation for anything related to terror in the Middle East. Yes, they have some involvement, but they are also backed by the US in order to keep that going. And when they feel like one person, those people are persona non grata anymore, they get moved out. It is the central area for any type of negotiation in the Middle East for the last over 20 years. So the fact of saying that they are bad dog or something, no, I disagree.
How many of the negotiations in the Middle East over the last 20 years have been done transparently, openly, and have abided by whatever like terms and conditions set out? So, what has the last 20 years brought? In the last 20 years, they've been the negotiators for what? They stood on the side of Al Qaeda, what, the Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah. Like, oh great, yeah, you're proving my point here.
Yeah, but they bring a table where everyone can sit on. Malcolm, you have some points on that? I saw
Yeah,
you.
I agree with you on that point. And look, the Qataris set this up nicely, right? Emiratis were about show, bringing in Western money. The Qataris, other than the World Cup, they didn't want any of that. They wanted to be, they wanted to balance themselves out with the world. They have the United States, largest base in the region, Al Ubaid, right there. And then at the same time, they have the leadership of the Taliban, which gives them credibility amongst the Muslim world, leadership of Hamas, not much of Al Qaeda, by the way, but Kuwait always wanted to have its little corner and not be involved. So Saudi Arabia with Mohammed bin Salman, they talk big, but apart from exercising their oil power, they're really focused more in Iran. So it put Qatar, I think, describing them as sort of this Switzerland is actually a really good way of describing it. And look what's happened. Now it turns out that they are punching way above their weight, and this thing is paying off for them.
So, Will, do you have any more updates on the car story?
As of now, it appears the car was on the U.S. side, traversing towards the Canadian side. At some point, the driver lost control.
So, I do we have like conflicting reports on that? Because someone told me that every news station has a different story they're spinning on this.
Yeah, there are multiple reports about the size of the explosion. That's sort of the controversy right now. Evidently, U.S. Border and Customs is calling it an accident, and their sources within there is calling it an accident. People at the FBI are still saying they assume it's terrorism. Who knows what's going on at this
Maybe
point.
that's just like a normal thing to do. They assume it like that, so they investigate it as such.
That might be, yes. Yeah, that very well could be. But at this point, it looks like if it was an act of terrorism, it was just a car with a bunch of fuel in it that rammed the barricade and exploded.
Still, there you go. And that was what we call vehicle as weapon system,
Yep.
or panicked, civilian. But it was dramatic. But that's why I was really concerned about what side of the border did it occur on?
Yeah,
Which entryway did they come through?
There's more and more reports that it was U.S. to Canada.
Yeah, okay. Now that, if I had known that in the first 5 minutes, I would have looked twice at this, because no one goes to Canada or towards Canada to commit an act of terrorism.
Yes,
Not even Canadians returning.
What's the worst thing going to Canada? The snow. Go ahead, Shahar.
Hi. I don't think that the fact that Qatar is the Switzerland of terror organizations put them in a good position. And as far as I remember or heard from one of the analysts, Qatar leadership woke up to a nightmare in the 7th of October because they thought that now they will be considered as a Taliban state. They will be blamed for this event. And actually, I think that's what should have been done. I hope the fact that currently there is still good relations with them is only to make them clean the shit they messed up. But that afterwards, after this whole nightmare will end, I think Qatar will have to give a very good answer, and I think she should compensate some of the damage and take responsibility for what she did. Diplomatically, she's a very tiny cockroach in the Gulf that is hated, but by most of her neighbors, especially by Saudi Arabia and the United Emirates. She uses Al Jazeera as a channel of propaganda and incitement against Saudi Arabia and United Emirates, and actually every country who is opposition to the Muslim Brotherhood. So she has a lot of enemies here in the Middle East that will be very glad to see her in trouble, apart from Turkey that she's in alliance with. That's my opinion about Qatar.
Sean, real quick, have you posted the video of the explosion?
Not on my account.
It's in the nest now. So there's a couple of conflicting things. So they say, so first of all, it was traveling at like 100 plus. The second accelerated after that. So I mean, they were running away from something, or maybe it's a fault. I mean, what I understood, it's a Bentley, right? So I don't know why would someone just blow up a Bentley. It would be really weird, unless you wanna. I don't know, but it looked like someone might have been smuggling something, and just were afraid, or so on, or running away from the law. Maybe it's a convicted criminal. I don't know. And I have a point about Qatar. Is that okay? If that's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Pickle.
Sure, thank you. So I mean, as far as Qatar, like it's yes, Switzerland, that would be a close example. It wouldn't be exact. The reason is it's so no country would be comfortable with having Hamas when living in its soil, right? And since that's the case, then that would be the ultimate authority that Hamas would trust with anything they do, and that could be used actually to pressure them. Given that they hold their leadership over there, that now they're I mean, they always were war criminals, but now they are like war criminals X 100. So I would say that could pressure Hamas to. I don't know what deal could be struck that would be fair. The Taliban, Hamas, and the U.S. and the international community that is safe, except Qatar, and they chose that rule, and they're, I mean, like it or not, they're doing a good job at hosting terrorists.
Hey, Sean, there's actually one more update that
All
just
right, go
hit.
for it.
So I think Fox, and there was another, I just saw a local reporter tweeted out to him. I'm trying to find the original tweet again. Evidently, law enforcement sources are now saying, so the car was a Bentley, and evidently they now believe it was stolen. So it sounds like individuals stole a fancy car, which it's got if it's the model I'm thinking of Bentley, it's probably got a 24-gallon fuel tank. If it was full, it's quite a bit of fuel. And they got flagged for additional inspection, panicked, accelerated, hit a concrete barrier, went airborne, crashed into something, and the car exploded. But it sounds like it may have just been an incident of a stolen car.
Yeah, it'd be really weird if somebody, having a plan for a terrorist attack to choose that target. It's like, I mean, it happens, but it's really weird.
I'll allow it.
Looking at the videos and everything, it really looks like a crash more than anything else. Like, I don't know. I've been looking at all
Yeah, the
the
more information we get, it does look like that.
Yeah, it looks like maybe he was trying to escape. Maybe he wanted to go and live the El Dorado life in Canada. I don't know why would you want to do that, except for Ben Yehuda, judging them for that. But I don't know. It looks really weird. Like there is not a single
Malcolm, what's up, my
angle.
brother? It's Lev. How are you?
Also, look at the gas. It's clearly gas that is. It doesn't look like explosion smoke.
What were you what were you saying, Lev?
I was going to ask Malcolm a question. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
How you doing, brother? I was going to ask you, during the ceasefire, does that mean Israel? I understand they can't shoot bombs or guided missiles, but do they have to stop all operations inside of Gaza, or are they going to continue doing whatever they're doing? It's just not a matter of heavy artillery.
That's a really good question, and this is going to be a real. I'm just dying to get off the Bentley now. Okay, now the story has gotten so weird.
Yeah, it's
That
probably just a crash.
let's stick to the war. I mean, but hey, it was good for terrorism for about 10 minutes there. Oh, by the way, insane rash of car thefts in Canada right now, shipping them right out of the country, straight from the theft spot. So maybe somebody wanted to ship a Bentley out of Toronto. So Lev Parnas asked a really good question. What the parameters of the ceasefire? Does that mean that all combat comes to a stop? Well, I have a little experience with the Israelis and ceasefires in Lebanon in 1983 and 1984. It just really, in this circumstance, the ceasefire holding is what's giving the hostages the ability to leave. 15 per day, is that right? So long as there are no ceasefire infractions, and the question is, what is a ceasefire infraction? Can a sniper whose position is being engaged by someone that violates the ceasefire, can he return fire? Or, I think that in terms of getting the hostages back, if it works on the first or the second transfer of hostages, and there's no treachery on Hamas's part, it would just be, clean your weapons, stand watches, and don't engage the enemy unless you're engaged. And then it will be a sniper war. And I one sniper shooting a guy that's creeping into the woodworks with an SVD rifle, and a suppressed sniper rifle, so long as CNN's not standing there, can get away with it. But when I was in Lebanon and the ceasefires were being broken up there between, like the Amal militia, and which was the predecessor to Hezbollah, and the Palestinians and the Syrians, there was a joke that a Syrian guard would fall asleep, his rifle would fall over and have a negligent discharge, and it would unleash an Israeli brigade artillery fire, across the entire mountain, across the entire region. So I don't think that'll happen this time. I think it'll be no shooty for the length of the hostage exchange.
Thank you, my man. Appreciate that.
That's all right, man.
It gives
I
them time to,
forgot.
search the areas they already have captured. Go
I
over it with
forgot to
fine-tooth
add. I don't know if you heard about this, but in the press conference, both security minister, defense minister, and prime minister promised to assassin head of Hamas in Qatar, both Hania and Mash'al.
Anyone?
No, we let you start the subject, Sean, and then we listen. I have a question for the people that have been or worked on hostage exchange. Let's go into this detail. If we're gonna talk about tomorrow, what do you think is the procedure, and when we can start getting names, information about the people, all those points, and how fast will that information come out? Will we get? Yeah.
Interesting. Hey, well, let me break this down into two phases, because for 10 years, on most of 10 years, I worked on trying to what we call isolate hostages. That was using intelligence to find the exact locations of hostages in Lebanon. There were over 100 Western hostages that were taken in Lebanon, numerous Americans. We had a Marine colonel who was abducted by Hezbollah, then later executed. It is really hard to isolate hostages in a place the size of Lebanon, but you're going to have some interesting places where they're going to be coming out of in Hamas land. They're going to, and I think that's why Hamas initially asked for no surveillance flights by Israel, because if you do surveillance flights, then you can, see where the hostage originate, which spider holes they might come out of. But here's what I generally think. I ran also the U.S. Navy's hostage survival school for special operations personnel for 4 years, 5 years, starting just on the same day the Kenya and Tanzania bombing started, because we had a lot of operators that were going near Al Qaeda at what we call elbow length, and that captivity is very different. Hostage takers, when they're going to a release, we have some really good examples that were given. From Lebanon, and Hezbollah, by all accounts, they were not nice people. I mean, they created, over time, they created hostage cells. They would transport you by duct taping you toe to the top of your head like a mummy and transporting you in voids under cars. Here, it's all going to be tunnels. Here, and I calculated this on soon after the hostages were taken, they're going to require a 3 to 5 man full-time watch section. Hostages, if they're civilians and elderly and children, they'll be kept in groups of 3 to 5 more likely, depending on the number of children. The problem is a lot of those hostages were not taken by Hamas. Some of them were just civilians. We're taking them and we're told, hey, take these guys back. And Palestinian Islamic Jihad, right? Completely different group, has some coordination, but not necessarily going to do what Hamas says in the terms of this war. So they're going to have to be marshaled, and we would always do this little marshaling before we did our simulated hostage rescues. There will not be any big hostage rescues here, right? No one's flying in and fast roping into the middle of this. They're going to marshal them together. They're going to have neutral intermediaries, which are Palestinian citizens who were members of the International Committee of the Red Crescent, which is the Muslim world's Red Cross, come and give some accountability, name, health check, things like that. And that might actually be on camera. But that's going to be in a marshaling center that is not in the tunnels. So they're going to escort them out. They're going to have them bagged over their heads, right? They don't want them to see anything. They're going to be weak, so they're going to be feeding them tea and dates and some rice and food before they come out. Then they're going to be taken to a marshaling center, which is likely a building that has not been leveled. And then they're going to bring the Red Crescent representatives over there. And that's when you're going to see video, right, of them with the Red Cross checking them and saying, yes, they've been eaten. Yes, they're in good order. May even have some clean clothes because they're going to have been living in their clothes the whole time because, terrorists don't treat people very well when you're in captivity. They soil themselves all the time, sleep on cardboard mats or concrete. So some may have been injured by bombings. So once they're in the marshaling center, the Red Cross checks them in. Then I understand there's going to be a handover. And the handover is going to be that there's going to be a designated spot. It's going to be under surveillance, of course. And I understand that the Israelis got designated personnel unarmed who are supposed to come up, escort one hostage at a time and bring them out. It's going to be like Bridge of Spies, right? Where you bring your man to our spot, we bring our man to our spot, we stand there, we say, this is person X, this is person Y. Walk. They walk over. Next two, X, Y, walk. And then you exchange your 50, 150 people. You get la, 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 la on the other side. And nobody engages nobody. And we get our hostages out. And they're going to get immediately whisked away to a treatment center where they're going to first treatment, right? Nobody can think when you're delirious. Nobody can talk. They're not going to want to debrief them until they've been treated, fed, seen relatives, and then debrief, right? Tell me every moment of your captivity, to when the guy said, check, walk over the bridge or walk over. And that's generally how it's done.
That's quite interesting. And so there will be no Hamas operative. It will be all the Red Crescent. So people, Palestinians that are, or they will be at the exchange point. They will be Hamas operative. Usually.
Well, the Red Crescent, those people, a lot of guys over there, they're not going to, let's just say there won't be any shooters, right? There may be Hamas civil representatives from the health ministry, but you're not going to be seeing, North Korea style border, black face mask Hamas, shooter against, with a standing across from a face masked Israeli, Sayeret Makal guy who's, it's going to be civil transfer. It'll be watched by both sides. The ceasefire could break at any time. Here's one of the dangers that we had is that we every once in a while, when we did our simulated captivities, we would shoot a couple of hostages on the transfer and say that the other side did it. And, just to create what we call a dilemma, right? And the dilemma is just get down, move towards your transfer point, right? Sometimes gun battles break out nearby, things like that. So let's see how it's going to go. It's tomorrow.
Go ahead, Nog.
Thanks, Sean, for having me on again. Great panel. Pleasure to be on with Malcolm. Quick question for Malcolm. Two questions, and I'm thinking Noga might have a response to the second one here. In regards to the elimination of Hamas, where do you think that is realistically? Is it literally eliminating all Hamas members that they can find, or is it eliminating infrastructure and ability to commit violence in Israel? Because I'm thinking if it's the first there, not the latter, where they're looking for every specific Hamas member, you're looking at a long-term insurgency. I'm not sure that's viable for Israel, or if that's something they want to be entangled in. Second question is, you think we're looking at a long-term occupation of Gaza, or once it's stabilized and all infrastructure for terror is eliminated, do you think it's in Israel's best interest, or the more realistic plan is to hand that over to a new Palestinian leadership? Thank you.
Ugh, that's a tough one. If I were Israel and I understand where they come from, I lived there for a while. I almost got married. I spoke at Auschwitz a couple of years ago at a conference called Never Again, Really? And it was about the rising tide of genocide. and I met a few Auschwitz survivors. It was the second time I was invited there. Um, I got to tell you, there is no way anyone in Israel, once they get their hostages, to allow Hamas to exist as a military organization, as a civil organization, as anything other than people who have to stand in line and, who weren't military. And this is one of the things that somebody asked the other day on another forum, and it was Marriott Report. Intelligence exploitation is the biggest key here right now. When we would do operations like this, one of the things that we were looking for was what we call the crown jewels of intelligence of a terrorist group, right? Like at bin Laden's house. What you really want is not the operatives, you want the master personnel database. And if you want the master personnel database, don't go to the admin office, go to the finance office because you got to pay these guys. Hamas was a military structure, it was a military organized terrorist group, but they had to pay operatives. They had to have people who had rally points, drill weekends, range days. All of those things are going to be into names. And unlike us when we were in Ukraine, where everybody used a cover name or a call sign, a lot of these people, they're an admin organization. ISIS was the same way. The Israelis have biometrics on a lot of these people. They're going to be able to get ID. It's going to be a national exploitation effort to determine who was a Hamasi, who was administration, who worked in the hospitals. Some of them are complicit in some of these activities we're finding now. But I think the destruction of the military branch of Hamas, every man who handled a weapon, every man who has a weapon dead. That's going to be the requirement. And yeah, you could do a low grade insurgency, but I'd rather have a low grade insurgency with 100 and 200 guys that survived in the ones and twos who were never in the same, brigade, as they call it, or battalion. They had 24 battalions of Hamas, 30,000 men, than to have 25,000 men survive this thing. And there's no way, Netanyahu, Gantz, no one is going to allow those men to live. I wouldn't. I'd say.
I think there's another element to this we're not bringing up here, which is on the after part. Who's the other organization that's going to take over? The Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, all their major militants, like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, support October 7th, and they want to do it too. They've been very open. The Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Guy One Below, Mahmoud Abbas, he said that after the war is done, he wants to form a unity government with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. PIJ is another problem here. They're probably not funded by Hamas, but they're directly funded by Iran, the IRGC. So are we going to hand over Gaza to the PA and PIJ and PFLP and those organizations, and that's going to be the new government? Like, again, the PA has a pay-for-slay program. This came out in international court. They use American, Canadian, Western taxpayer dollars, the aid money they get, and it's used to pay the families of terrorist members to commit more acts of terrorism. And I mean, yes, take out Hamas, but what? Then just give Gaza control to the other. I mean, listen, PIJ, PFLP, and the PA are all openly jealous of what Hamas did and say they want to do it themselves. And it's monumentally naive to say, okay, we'll defeat Hamas, take them all out, and then throw it over to Mahmoud Abbas, who has no legitimacy in the Gaza Strip, and a PhD in Holocaust denial from the Soviet Union.
So Daniel, and just to quickly add on to my question, so I appreciate the responses, but so I guess then long term, are we looking at a second West Bank where it's just going to be a long term occupation, or do you think the sentiment is okay? We don't have solutions at the moment, but the goal is to hand this back to some type of Palestinian leadership that we can trust. Obviously, that's a hope and a prayer right now, but is that the goal, or do you think the Israelis at this point are like, nope, we're going to occupy that for the foreseeable future? Thanks.
I would say the goal has to be to defeat the Palestinian resistance, because if you give control back to the Palestinians, then October 7th becomes a holiday for them, and they will celebrate it every year and tell their kids about what a great victory it was. They have to be defeated here, and this means Israel takes Gaza. Doesn't mean that all Palestinians are kicked out and all this and that, but how you, I mean, if you want what the amount of deprogramming that needs to go into the Gaza population. I mean, you've all seen what UNRWA teaches them there. I mean, they've been raised on a diet of war, jihad, and anti-Semitic propaganda since birth. So until you have a population that's at least, been, educated somewhat over generations on, math and literature and science in schools instead of terror and all that, you don't have a population that's able to coexist right now. Recent surveys say 3 out of 4 Palestinians support October 7th. Like, you're just not going to have a viable Palestinian state that can coexist with Israel. Again, what got Gaza into this situation in the first place? It was taking out the Israeli presence. It was giving them full autonomy. Like, this is the consequences of Palestinian autonomy. And it does, none of us want to say it out loud. It sounds terrible. And listen, I believe Palestinians have the right to self-determination just like everyone else. I do. But if you use the self-determination to launch a war on someone else, then they have the right to fight that war against you. So if you don't want a war, don't start a war. And it's going to need a military solution. And if you just, take Gaza and then take it from Hamas and give it to the PA, that's what happened in the first place. Another jihadist group is going to take over. That's what happened in 2005. They pretty much, the PA is strong, we'll give it to PA. And then there'll be elections. And then without the Israelis there, the jihadis just stormed over, killed all of Fatah, and then started flinging rockets into Israel. So this is the cold hard reality of what happens when Israel allows autonomy in a region run by terrorists. All the most powerful factions in the Palestinian territories are terrorist organizations, and the Israelis don't have the luxury of naivety anymore to just ignore this and hope it will go away.
Go ahead, James.
I want to ask a question. I've asked already that to the panel, but Malcolm was not here. It's about that specific point that Daniel was talking about. So considering after this war, the PA will be at its weakest, the PA, Hamas, everything Palestinian Authority-wise will be at its weakest. Wouldn't it be the best time for the Israeli to set up a plan for a two-state solution? Like if the head of the states consider that, I'll be called triangulating and everything for that. But I really believe that it's the best time to push a certain policy on them in order to impose a certain set of rules that can be followed for, like, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, reach a certain two-state solution with a state and the state minus for the Palestinian without an army. What's your opinion on that?
Well, you're asking me. I have to let me talk about some of Danny's comments first. I think that Israel is going to have to mentally prepare itself for the full reoccupation of Gaza. There's just no way that you're going to be able to allow any remnant of the Hamas to exist. Now, about the Palestinian Authority, don't forget that, Palestinian Authority lost its authority because there were elements in Israel who thought that Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas were old terrorists from the old school and that you had to give them payback and you weren't going to work with them because they came to the table as terrorists and created the authority, and that maybe it was better to have this balancing act of Hamas on Gaza. And now look what we got, right? I remember the very day it happened and I thought, the Palestinian people have voted for a terrorist group. That can't be allowed to happen again. This is going to require something that whoever the president of Israel is, right? Netanyahu, I doubt it's going to be Benjamin Netanyahu. But to be quite honest, it's going to take a grand bargain time now, right? What they really need is they need a combined, KFOR style. Somebody once mentioned a KFOR style pan-Arab force to come into Gaza and take over the security side of things. Let them take the, step-up pistol assassinations to the head at night instead of the Israeli army, right? But you cannot give Gaza back to, just hand it over to the people that were left with, hundreds and hundreds of destroyed buildings. So that's probably where that's going to go. You're going to have to start looking at a broad regional Arab solution to this. Otherwise, all you got is angry Palestinians, and you're going to have them forever until you give them hope of something. And that hope is going to have to be the serious discussion of the two-state solution. And then, you're going to have to start talking about a neutral force in between the West Bank and Israel, whether that's going to have to involve U.S. troops in the future. But someone's going to have to do something big this time. It cannot go back to the status quo. Israel will say it themselves. They've lost too many individuals. They paid for this war in blood. Status quo can't exist unless you're going to occupy Gaza and force march everybody over to Ramallah, which ain't going to happen. Things are going to have to change historically.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Daniel, I want to tell you something about Abu Mazen, okay? Abu Mazen was the first leader that never support terror. Even he was the vice president of Arafat. He was against terror. And when Arik Sharon, he was the prime minister, and they broke Yasser Arafat broke the Oslo agreement, and they started the Intifada 2. And Arik Sharon occupied again all the territories that we gave to Arafat. He make a very good deal with Abu Mazen and go out again from these territories, because he didn't want that Israeli soldiers will be in these territories. Okay, he didn't want that, and he did a very good security agreement with Abu Mazen. And Abu Mazen was cooperated with everything. He was very good. More than 80% of trying to make a terrorist, he was by these forces. He stopped it. But what happened when the Bibi come up? He didn't want to continue with the program.
We're not going to turn this into another anti-Netanyahu space.
No, you cannot speak about Abu Mazen, but you tell me we don't speak about Netanyahu, because you lie.
Making this another Israeli politics.
You lie if you do that. The people have to know the truth. What happened here? Okay? If the people here care about Israel, they have to know all the truth, all the picture, not what you want. Because you support Netanyahu, you give them only the part of the picture what happened here. So I
don't support Netanyahu or not support Netanyahu. I'm a U.S. citizen. I don't vote in Israeli elections. It's just last time you did this, the space went completely out to hell, and you started cussing people out.
No, the space. What we have to do now, we have to speak about what will be happen now in Gaza
I'll recommend something to you. Make a space with Israeli and discuss about that, because we don't know anything about Israeli politics, and I think most of us do not know anything about Israeli politics. And whenever we involve ourselves in other people's politics, the same way I don't want people to involve themselves in Lebanese politics. I can explain it, but I don't want people to get involved in the day-to-day of the politics. I think Noga would agree. I think other Israeli would agree. They don't want people from around the world to understand how their politics work, because it's very complicated, like every single political mainly Israeli people. And if people want to listen to it, they join the Israeli space. Just a suggestion. Quick suggestion.
All right.
Sabri, welcome.
Go ahead, Sabri. Welcome in space. Hey, Yam, I see you in the audience. Come on up, Yam. All right. Appears this conversation has sort of gone out.
What have you done today, Sean, apart from being in Spaces?
Not much. Mostly just Spaces. See, we've covered pretty much all of the current news cycle. Broke down and analyzed the accident that people thought was a terrorist attack. And
Yeah, I
here
saw.
we are. I think the peak today was 1,700 people at one time, which is a new milestone for me. I'd like to thank everyone here for coming. That was great. Appreciate all of you. All right.
We have Sean that just joined. Hey, Sean.
Hi. Thanks for taking my request. I just had the question, is there any use that Israel can make out of this coming, you call it a pause or whatever you want to call it? Is there anything that they can do with it, as maybe disadvantageous as it might be to the Israeli side?
You mean Hamas? What Hamas could
No. Hamas's motivation for wanting the pause, Hamas's use for the pause is obvious, but could Israel use it for any purpose of their own?
That Hamas would get much more benefit out of it. So this is just another case of Israel sacrificing more Jewish soldiers and Jewish lives to, play appeasement politics with Palestinian terrorists, and hopefully they get the 50 hostages back. That would be, I guess, some sort of record for them. But no, it comes at the cost of the lives of Israelis. It elongates the war for both Israelis and Palestinians. So Hamas wins. Hamas wins, and the Muslim Brotherhood International pressure organizations, they win too.
And then then the media machine's gonna try to say, well, why do they have to start the war back up? It's been so bad already. And they'll push and they'll push and they'll push.
It was one of their objectives, though. Like, it's still one of the objectives of the Israeli, getting the hostages out. I agree the deal is not the best. I have to agree. I was surprised by how lenient they were toward Hamas. But it's still one of the objectives. Like, destroying Hamas off the face of the earth is one objective. Second objective is the other one, which is get the hostages out. They could get them military. I think they tried for 40x days to get them out military. Some of them died. I won't say most. Some of them died based on what Hamas said, so we're not sure about the death. So maybe they saw it as an opportunity to get people out. Like, that's another point that we need to get into consideration, is that they need to save face internally inside of Israel. It's been 40 plus days. So the family of the hostages, everyone is also suffering. Like, there is give or take on both ends. Like, that's the point.
What happens when this pause, is it a hard and fast line as to when it ends? Like at a certain hour?
It's
I think so.
you get 24-hour YAM, right? Per 10 hostages.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the number per day or something, but I know that it starts in a very specific hour tomorrow, and I think it just ends in a very specific hour 4 days later. Like,
Okay,
exactly.
so there is a hard and fast, right at this minute of this hour, it's done.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's gonna play out, because just like you're saying,
Has anyone else heard that?
you can check. It's
since we have Thanksgiving tomorrow, what's the practice in Israel of the same thing?
Go ahead, Samuel.
There's some reporting that there was a Lebanese politician belonging to Hezbollah, and that his son was actually killed in the strike today in south of Lebanon. So we could see some more escalation along that border.
Sorry.
Gotcha. But
Not-
if
not
they
the
killed like an
himself.
elected Lebanese official, would the state of Lebanon not be okay with that?
Okay, they'll ask for investigation, but not much will happen. Except if they targeted him, like if it was an assassination. If he was in his house and a bomb artillery dropped on his house, they'll ask for an investigation and then go to criminal court and everything to push it out this way. They would not retaliate as Lebanon.
So literally nothing would happen, is what you're saying.
Hezbollah might react, the Lebanese army will never react. That's the difference.
Gotcha.
Also, there were a bunch of Afghans killed in the Israeli airstrike in Syria today.
Why were there Afghans there?
Because they're being funneled from Afghanistan by Iran to fight.
Like, so, like, how many are, like, they're being funneled into Syria to fight, or they're being funneled by Iran to the border to do something else? Like, they're participating in the militia wars?
Let's point something out. Let's point. Around the world, you had the people that came to join ISIS from all around the world. You have Afghans, you have Yemeni, you have Lebanese, you have Kurds, you have Turks, you have a bit from everyone. Iranian, a state of like group of people that's how.
It was Russia and Iran that came to the aid of Assad and helped him stabilize the country. So bordering Iran is Afghanistan. So there's some tentative dealings between the Taliban and the Islamic Republic. But yeah, this is what you're talking about. Is a lot of bad foreign actors are just funneling militants through the Shia croissant to different terrorist proxy factions all throughout the region.
There's been a lot of like rumor and intelligence and like some non-proven sources stating that there were a large amount of Afghans being funneled by Iran, but today is the first day that they've actually dug up some bodies under rubble and confirmed it.
From what I can see, the ceasefire is from tomorrow morning. The hostages start to come back only from the day after, and it is not clear whether or not it is as agreed upon. And people are now talking about it, whether or not this is what we agreed to, or is it just a term that slipped in at the last second, or whatever is going on. People are mad. Let's see.
They say that the release won't happen before Friday, and they say the agreement is not signed yet. I remember that previously Israel claimed that the ceasefire will be as soon as the hostages will be released, not before. So if if it's a new term, that this is also a gap that there is in the agreement. And nobody knows why there is this postpone. They just have, they don't have any assumptions. But what Israel says that it's not signed yet, it's very weird what's happening. Very weird. I wouldn't be surprised that it's connected to the fact that both defense minister and prime minister threatened the heads of Hamas. I wouldn't be surprised. I thought it was an error to do so, even if you mean to do so. It's not the right thing to threat at the eve of release of hostages, but it's not clear currently.
There is an interesting poll that came out of the elections from the Pays-Bas, the Netherlands. The extreme right, like actually a very, very extreme right, it's one of the most extreme right parties in Europe, seems to have won the elections. It was not expected. They were expected to lose, and the party is
In what country?
in Netherlands.
Was there an election there today?
Yes.
Yeah, Gert Wilder's party won the majority of or won the most seats.
So what does
Not
that
the
mean?
majority. Yeah, it's the majority.
Is
not
the
sorry,
anti-Muslim,
that's
right?
close.
Is the anti-Muslim
Yes.
that
Yes.
he produced the film against Islam, something.
Wait,
Yes,
that was the
exactly.
guy that they tried to put in jail, right?
Yes, exactly. He's the type of guy that said, for example, we don't have any Quranic school in the country. We don't want to have mosques in the country. It would be illegal. He does. He called all Moroccans like thugs.
So
He's very.
did he like went on a mandate of wanting to go after and crack down on religious liberty?
Yes, he was on a mandate to clear out like the Islam from the region. Islam
That's fucked.
Yeah, so that's not the first one. I think the first one was Italy, which was more against immigration in general, and now Netherlands going against Islam specifically. It's not great. Yes, I wanted to point that out.
I think it's the backslash of what's happening now in Europe with the demonstration, pro-Hamas demonstrations.
Just to point out, the son of the politician who died, the politician is a very high-level guy in Hezbollah. He's very known in Lebanon, and his son was involved in the party, I don't know to what extent, but he was involved in the party. So he might be dead on a mission or something. So just so people, like, he wasn't like sitting in his home and he randomly got bombed. I'm not sure, but probably.
James, yesterday or the day before, I wanted to ask you, the house of a parliament member from Amal, Kablan, was hit in Misl Jabal. Do you know what hit by IDF? Do you know what might have been the reason?
No, I think it's a shot near the area. They've been shooting artillery in the southern villages. I don't think they were targeting that area specifically. It hit an outskirt of the house. It's not the house completely. The guy was not even in the house. There was some destruction. It was a big house he had. So if you take it at face value, I don't think it means much. So in Lebanon, it didn't make a lot of a fuss. Like one message or two were sent in general media, a bit of discussion, but that's it.
All right. Let's see. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out the space. I'm gonna be going to that space I posted up there in the nests. Anyone who wants to go check that one out. They're doing a deep dive into 9/11, not a conspiracy deep dive, but like one of the guys who worked on the 9/11 commission is basically talking about sort of the Saudi connections and things of that nature, and they're going really deep into it, and they're going to be exploring it. Brian Cunningham is a very, very experienced guy. He has a lot of knowledge on this issue, And I mean, I couldn't recommend that space enough. And honestly, that's where I'm heading right now.
Hey, Sean, great space, great panel you had up here today, man. Great
Thanks,
job
Doge.
you're
I
doing.
appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to do another one with Matt.
Oh, yeah, I'm working on that, believe me.
Dude, that'd be great. But he seems like a busy man.
That's all right. He likes the attention. He'll come.
Oh, man, he was in the hot seat, too. He was a good sport about it. We were just going all over that.
I told him he's like Michael Jordan back in the day. He comes on the road, but, can handle the heat, and he sure got some.
All right. Well, see you guys.
Bye-bye.